Good evening. This is Wednesday, January 27th. We're recording. This is Redwood Wonk on KZZH and Channel 12, Access Humboldt. My name is Eric Kirk. Chuck Rogers is with me. We've got lots of news. We're going to get right into it. Let's start with Biden. Chuck, what's been going on with Joe Biden for the past week?
Executive order palooza, I guess you would call it. He's starting out with a flurry, and this is what he said he was going to do. He was going to get to work on day one, and it seems as if he has, and so has the new Vice President Kamala Harris. So, I've been pleased with what's going on. I was glad that he put some things about climate change up front here in the first weeks of his administration. So that's good. I'm glad to see that happening. He doesn't yet have the full cabinet yet, but I've been pleasantly surprised that most of his nominees for cabinet positions have been sailing through, including the new Secretary of Defense. So that's good. I think Pete Buttigieg is coming up shortly here for Secretary of Transportation. I expect him to be confirmed. There may be some problems with Homeland Security and some of the other positions. I would be surprised if all of his nominees just sailed through easily, but so far so good. He has some, I think, a good rollout, good ideas on the pandemic and getting more vaccines available more quickly. We'll see how that goes, though. Obviously, that's easier said than done, but. Mm-hmm. So far it's nose to the grindstone, and he's doing what he can, and he's allowing the Senate to deal with impeachment and/or censure, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think we can keep up with all the executive orders, but some key ones. He's going to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill.
Yes, right.
He's got. I mean, these are just little things, but they're important symbolically. There's going to be a sign language interpreter at each of the press conferences. And then bigger things, the cessation of drilling on federal lands, on most of the federal lands, that's creating a bit of a stir in Wyoming. We can talk about that later. More stuff on immigration, and on racial equality. He wants to move towards the abolishing of private federal prisons, and he's starting basically with saying that DOJ will enter into no further contracts with it. That's a ways from actually getting rid of the existing ones, particularly in the immigration, but one step at a time. Right. I don't think that other than maybe not going far enough, I don't think the left can complain about his executive orders. They've been probably the most aggressively progressive of any Democrat in a long time, and they're not all just undoing Trump orders. He's actually moving forward.
Yeah, I was really pleased to hear what he had to say with regard to private prisons. That you and I have talked about this on this program over the years that we've been doing it. That's a real slippery slope to privatize prisons because, just so our listeners and viewers understand, the concern there is that the people who operate the private prisons are in it to make money. So if the prisons are not full, they're going to talk to their politician who they likely supported financially in his or her campaign and say, we need to fill up these prisons. That obviously is the wrong way to run the corrections system, the law enforcement system. So I was really glad to see that was not only on the radar, but there's something happening with it.
Yeah, the other thing about private prisons is that, and I'm not saying they do this, it may be that most don't, but the problem is that what is your incentive, especially if you're paid by the prisoner, what is your incentive to generate a report that looks good for the prisoner in terms of parole? And it may be that a lot of them, out of the kindness of their heart or out of ethics, do it. But the point is that there's no financial incentive to have somebody released. That they will lose money.
Yeah, when somebody's freedom is at stake, you can't make any assumptions about any of that at all. Yeah. You just have to make sure that the private profit incentive is not there in law enforcement, right?
Right. Now, I'm getting complaints from leftists. Well, there's still the immigration camps. There's still all these other existing. I'm like, you got to start somewhere. This is an executive order that's setting the tune. And you also need to watch, one thing, even if you're a leftist complaining about capitalism and the rest, capitalists recognize when the writing is on the wall, and stocks in private prison companies tumbled. Like crazy after that. They know that that's probably going to be phased out. So it's just, it's signaling a lot more in the future. I actually do think that, may not happen totally with Biden, but that there's going to be a wholesale rejection of private prisons. I suspect that there'll be eminent domain. Taking them, paying for them, but the prisons from private people, I think a lot of them are leased anyway, and not managed here. That is a really good progressive thing. Yeah, there's things I guess you can complain about. Is Biden going to back down on the $1,400 an hour for the middle class, or is it just going to be targeted towards lower income? But you got to, the part of it isn't just getting help to people, but having it boost the economy. And, you hear conservatives, there are conservatives out there that I respect. And one of them is David Brooks, who's on PBS, and the rest. And he says, well, you might, overheat the economy. It's like, we haven't had an inflation problem since before the 2008 crash. We could use a little inflation. Overheating the economy with as much unemployment as we have right now is not a problem.
Yeah, I agree. The economy needs a little heat, and you can even find some generally conservative, maybe centrist economists who are all for stimulus, because the truth is our economy in this country depends on consumption. People can't consume without income. And during a pandemic, when so many businesses have been shut down, some of them may not even return. This is a time when people are, if they have any income at all, they're trying to protect it because the future is uncertain right now. So if there was ever a time for economic stimulus, it would be at a time like this, right?
Yeah, this is it.
This is it. Yeah.
I mean, and all, of course, as we predicted, the Republicans are all of a sudden concerned about deficits again for the first time in 4 years. Just how amazing how that works. They were obsessed with it under the 8 years of Obama, and then the minute Trump got in there, oh no, we don't need to worry about that. The thing is investors aren't worried about the debt. It can be a problem. It can crowd out credit. It can, if it reaches too high of a ratio with regard to gross domestic product, it can cause problems. But it's really not the problem right now. And we've never pulled out of a lowered deficits by cutting budgets. That doesn't happen. When you cut budgets, you're pulling money out of the economy, and then you're reducing the revenue generating transactions, and you actually aggravate the deficit. It happens almost every time, not every time, but almost every time. The way you pull out of it is how Clinton lowered the deficits, which was by expanding the economy, increasing the revenue, and then paying off debt more aggressively with that increased revenue. That's what needs to happen. And the question is are they going to want to undermine Biden once again to make him a one-termer like they wanted to do with Obama?
Well, doesn't your point there argue for something like a giant infrastructure project right about now? Doesn't it argue for things like that, where we could do big things right now that would put people back to work? We've done that before. It's been a long time, but we've done it before. It seems to me that, once again, now is the time, right?
Yeah. Well, on my way here, I was listening to Jefferson Radio, and they were interviewing Pete Buttigieg, who is, as I said, I think up next, and he wants to go big. He wants to establish high-speed rail, but he also wants to use some money to invigorate public transit projects all over the country, including in urban areas and the rest, because we've actually, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is it's reduced emissions a bit.
Right.
We'd like to continue that, and that's jobs creation there, not just short term for the construction, but long term. That's something that can save the consumer money, and it has impacts. The public transit in this country has been in poor shape. We had actually public transit in the Bay Area and Los Angeles and areas like that were looking good. The Key system, which actually had a railroad system that went across the lower part of the Bay Bridge, all got torn up. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories that it was tire companies and car companies that bought it and tore it up. I think it's not quite that simple, but there is an aspect of truth to it. It's time we look at that and went big, because we really haven't had a big project since like the Tennessee Valley Authority or the Hoover Dam or some of those projects.
Right. Interstate highway system, something like that. I'm glad you mentioned public transit, because I think, and I have not read any of Pete Buttigieg's commentary on this. I'd be interested in it. I'm kind of looking forward to following his confirmation hearing whenever that happens. I guess that's soon. But to your point, public transit, and not only is it job creation, but it also gets to the issue of climate action, which we obviously need to do. But wouldn't it be a good idea if there were some way, and maybe Buttigieg will talk about this, I don't know, if there were some way to, as we're moving in that direction, put some investment in places like West Virginia and Wyoming that are traditionally coal-producing states, where you're going to get the most objection to moving in the direction that you and I are talking about. Right. Why not prioritize doing something for West Virginia and Wyoming, and maybe some of the oil-producing states too along the Gulf Coast that could use some investment in that area as well, as a show of good faith that this is something we need to do, and we can move forward past coal and oil and so on, and get there. And here's how. What do you think about that? I mean,
I think that's a great idea. West Virginia, first of all, actually has a pretty effective government. Yes, it's a Republican government, but they actually they're doing best with the vaccines. California's doing a really bad job, by the way. Right. And maybe Newsom was too busy kissing up to Trump. I'm sorry, I didn't like that. But anyways, there should have been a plan. It should have been rolled out. I'll give them, the states, a little bit of a break there, pass there, because Trump just brought the vaccine, said, here they are, now you got to get them out without giving them the resources to do that. That's what Biden is trying to make up for. But West Virginia took a model that you would think that progressives would appreciate. Most of the states are dealing with CVS and the big pharmaceutical companies, right, and they're not being as effective. The West Virginia governor had it sent to all of the local people, the local pharmacies. They benefit from a little bit of subsidization from the state, and they're getting it. They're doing the job. Each one is doing the job in their community. With us, it's like all CVS, Kaiser Permanente doesn't know what to do. They're doing a really bad job right now, particularly in Sonoma County. But I'll tell you, and this is a topic for another time, maybe, what all of this tells you is that we really need a national health care system. We've got all this disparate stuff, all these different entities all over the place doing their own thing, it'd be like a fleet, doing their own thing. We need coordination. We need infrastructure that links it all together. Maybe they could privatize some of it, but we really need a national health care system. But anyways, we're getting back to West Virginia. Yes, this is, coal is going to fail anyways. It's not because of environmental legislation either. It's because of natural gas. It just cannot compete with natural gas. It won't be able to compete with the other energy systems. It's just they have to move out of it. So anything that can help transition West Virginia would be good. It would be good politically for Democrats. Manchin, he's supposed to be the moderate.
Right.
He probably wouldn't oppose it if that's what it includes. That's that's jobs and money right there in his state. That might handle the problems the Democrats might have with him. May have to do something in Arizona too. But anyway.
Well, I think it's some of what you say would also apply to the state of Wyoming, and some people might not agree with that. But here's what I mean by that: you got Congresswoman Liz Cheney, of course, Dick Cheney's daughter, in the House of Representatives representing Wyoming, is taking some heat right now. So it might be good both for big projects and also politically to go into states like that. I mentioned Wyoming because I was reading recently some comments by some folks in Gillette, Wyoming, which is the northeastern part of the state where a lot of coal development is. Gillette kind of came on board after Rock Springs, Wyoming, which is in the southwest part of the state as far as coal development goes. The reason I'm familiar with it is when I was in graduate school, I did a bit of a study of the public administration issues involved in rapid energy growth for small towns. And it turns out that a lot of the towns in Wyoming obviously know they're in an energy development area. And so they do have some pre-planning going. They are able to adapt to differences in what's being done in their area and not be too overwhelmed by it. So I would think that if future Secretary Buttigieg had this in mind, he could approach states like Wyoming and West Virginia and say, this is what we're going to do. We hope you guys are on board. And if so, we can locate some of this in your states. So,
well, I want to really quickly too give a little bit of a shout out to Lynn Cheney, and it's not going to happen very often, but she was one of the 10 Republicans who voted against the crowd with regard to Trump, and of course. She's facing a backlash. Corey Lewandowski is actually reportedly going there to try to look for a primary opponent against her. I mean, and McCarthy, who initially said, "Well, you need to vote your conscience," all of a sudden is backing off that, saying, "Well, I kind of have my doubts about her." I mean, what a weasel! I'm sorry, that is just absolute, spineless. Weasel, afraid of the Trump base. One of those people backing off their criticisms of Trump because they've still got a real problem in the party. But she was one of the 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment. And some of the other Republicans are saying if this means that it's the end of my political career, then so be it. So you got a few people there doing it. So, but she probably will try to make up for it by going up against Biden with regard to pulling the oil leases and the rest. And there's probably going to be a fight there. And there's even talk within the Republican Party of Wyoming of seceding. I think that would be a real bad idea for them because they actually take in a lot more federal money than they give in revenue. And moreover, they would have to buy up half of their own state because half of it's owned by the federal government. So that's probably not going to happen. It's one thing if you're Texas or something like that, or maybe even Alaska, but Wyoming, it's sort of like, okay, well, big deal, right? I mean, just you'd have this weird state in there. Anyway, Wyoming could be a focal point in this. It probably is one of the reddest states out there. It's hardly, I think, it's one of the least populated.
400,000 people.
400,000 people, yeah, like half of the population of San Francisco. So
exactly, yeah, right. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean but I'm all for doing something in there that would maybe blunt the opposition to to the preservation of the federal lands there, and
Yeah.
of the landmarks. And if it means some type of directing money into that area, great, because if they've got a way to make a living, they're not necessarily that wedded to oil drilling or anything
Right.
else.
Right. Can I back up just a minute? You mentioned Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help me understand. Of course, he represents the area around Bakersfield. Minority leader in the House of Representatives, been in politics a long time. Kind of known for being one of the people who checks the political winds before he makes a decision. But let's recall that he made a statement on the House floor following the January 6th insurrection, where he did say that President Trump was the one who was responsible for provoking that. He said that. It's on the record.
But he won't say it again.
But he won't say it again. When he said that, I thought, wow, very good. Maybe this is an example of how Republicans are going to use this as an obvious opportunity, an off-ramp for this. And then not, a week or two later, he had flip-flopped on that.
Yeah.
So something is happening there that is preventing people other than, as you said, Liz Cheney and a few others, from actually taking this exit ramp and moving the Republican Party back towards some direction that we would recognize. But, we would need to consult somebody, I guess, in his district to better understand what he's doing there.
Bakersfield is a pretty, I don't want to even say conservative, because when you're talking about the Trump movement, it's not conservative. It's actually kind of radical. And it's big there. It's a big deal. And McCarthy is afraid of him. He is timid. This is what's happening to the Republican Party. The people with any sense of principle are leaving. We'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen with the Senate a little bit later, but and the ones who are willing to take a stand, they take a huge risk unless they're in a liberal area or a moderate area. But this is, again, we've talked about the gerrymandering and we've talked about all that. But Bakersfield, it's not exactly a bastion of counterculture.
No, but
there are hippies that live there.
Is what we're seeing here an example of, or maybe an admission, let's put it that way, an admission that people like McCarthy and others don't have any solution, just as I don't have a solution to how to repair this divide in this country. And they're just saying, well, if I'm not going to solve this disinformation problem and this divide and the authoritarian strain in the Republican Party, if I want to keep my job, I have to be one of them. Is that what's going on?
I think that's the calculus that they've determined. This is why, why don't we move a little bit? I think we've covered Biden enough. He's doing the work. Oh, one more thing about Biden real quickly. Maybe we can talk about later. I don't want to get off this subject. I want to get back on it. But his conversation with Putin is vastly different from it was kind of a shock to Putin, who's basically been stroked for 4 years. Right. And Putin's later statement was, well, it was very professional, which is code word for we didn't get along. And it was funny because Biden held a press conference after that, and Fox reporter asked him, well, what did you and Putin speak about? And Biden said, he sends his regards. It was just, I mean, there's a little bit of it, but he raised Navalny, he raised, the hacking, he raised a bunch of other things and said this is not going to be tolerated. Did say, yes, we'll work to extend the nuclear agreement. That is a good thing. But so we'll see. Everybody's saying that Biden is going to be, cave to China because of all these big interests. I haven't seen any evidence of that. We'll see as the clampdown in Taiwan continues. Trump certainly didn't do anything about the clampdowns in Taiwan. It was all about trade for him. So, right. We'll see. We'll see what Biden does. But so far, it's I think that Biden and the rest of the world are kind of realizing we're kind of back in business here.
Yeah, one last thing on that, on his conversation with Putin.
Hong Kong.
Interesting.
I was corrected. Hong Kong is a part of it. Also Taiwan, but Hong Kong is where a lot of the demonstrations are.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Right. One last thing about President Biden's conversation with Vladimir Putin. After that, a bit of good news was that we actually got what's called a readout regarding the content of the conversation. And typically those are not, they're not word for word transcripts,
Right.
but they are a message from the administration about all the topics that were discussed and what direction the conversation went in. The reason I mention it is because for the last 4 years, there were not always readouts following a Trump discussion with Putin. And even the one or two that we did get were inadequate. But it's a very important thing. And sometimes we didn't even know that they had talked until there was reporting on it in the Russian media from the Russian news agency TASS. So we had to find out about it that way. And as you say, press briefings are now back on a daily basis, which is a good thing. So these are positive steps.
All right, let's take it back to the impeachment trial that is coming up. It is going to happen. Some people see it as a disappointment that only 5 Republicans voted to move forward with the trial. There was a motion that saying that it is unconstitutional. There's a lot of debate about that, whether or not you can effectively, under constitutional basis, impeach somebody who's no longer in office, since the primary point of it is to remove them from office, but it's also to keep them from returning to office.
Right.
And because it's not a standing president, and rumors are that Chief Justice Roberts didn't want any part of it. He got a lot of chastising for the first one. Trump was tweeting against him on a daily basis, that he didn't want it. Plus, he might have to actually hear a case pertaining to the constitutionality of it. So it looks like Leahy is going to be in there. Leahy had a little bit of a scare. We're not quite sure what. He went to the hospital last night under precautions, for medical precautions, because he wasn't feeling well. Reminds us all of how precarious that Democrat hold on is on the Senate. Probably a Democrat will win again in Vermont, but they could lose control for a few months anyway. Anyway, he's going to be presiding over the trial. Republicans are saying, not that Senator Leahy will be unfair, but it makes it look like a kangaroo trial. Leahy's in there, strictly procedural stuff. But the reason I bring it up is because McConnell is not running the show anymore.
Right.
McConnell would not allow any evidence to enter in the Senate trial that hadn't been raised in the House, leading up to impeachments. He just shut it down, would not allow any new evidence, any new testimony, nothing. It was basically, his view was the trial actually happens in the House. I have a totally different view of it. I see the House as kind of akin to a grand jury indictment. They look at the evidence to see whether there's a basis of it, and an actual trial is supposed to happen in the Senate. And I also think it's really inappropriate for anybody to say they're going to convict or not convict. And in both, you've got Republicans saying, no, we're going to vote to acquit before you've heard the evidence. If a juror said that any time prior to the close of trial, they'd be kicked off the jury, right? They should not be saying that. They should be saying, we're going to wait to see the evidence. Now, it's going to be a bit different because there is going to be new evidence happening. There's going to probably, the intelligence agencies are going to be brought in, and this time you've got an administration that's going to let them testify, are going to talk about not just what Trump said on that day, but what Trump knew or should have known from the intelligence reports about who was in the crowd and what they had planned to do, and look at whether or not, even though he threw in peaceful in one context, he was saying fight and don't be weak for the rest of the speech, what he knew or should have known that speech would have an effect. And as I think we discussed last week, every single one of the people that have been arrested, every single one of them are saying, well, we did what we thought the president wanted us to do, right? I mean, this was, there they showed up with pipe bombs, plastic handcuffs, even weapons, and they showed up ready to do business. They showed up to do that. He could not have known that. If he did, that makes him extremely incompetent. So this trial will hopefully go into detail about what the intelligence reports were given to him, or should have if he listened to it, and what led to at least 800 people out of his 5,000 rally storming the Capitol.
Yeah, they have it all recorded. It was televised live. And it was recorded on how many cell phones? How many? Hundreds. They have all of that. And not only that, but there were Republicans who were impacted by this because they were in the Capitol. They were victims of this. Not only that, but the Republican vice president then, Mike Pence, they were saying, hang Mike Pence.
That's right.
And they wanted to assassinate Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. So, I don't know how anybody could look at that evidence and not think that the people responsible for it should suffer the consequences, whatever those consequences might be. But just interestingly, I believe it was just yesterday there was reporting on what's going on with Mike Pence, because you haven't heard too much about him since January the 20th. We saw him at the inauguration, and it was good that he went. And but since then, nobody's heard from him or seen him. And it turns out that the reporting is that he's been moving from house to house, from location to location, almost every day because of those threats. And you have to take that seriously. So I'm very disappointed in some of the Republicans who I thought were reasonable, who are not stepping up to the plate on this.
Yeah. And like I said, this trial is going to be a bit different because people are going to come in and we may learn new evidence then. And I am going to have a prediction at the end of the show about how the trial is going to go. But the DHS today actually stated that there's danger of ongoing right-wing violence. It is they are hearing chatter of plans to do that, and there's going to be a lot to consider here, not just for the trial, but there were a lot of people who were QAnon fans who were like watching the inauguration and typing right into the thing. Well, when are the Secret Service going to come up and arrest everybody?
Exactly.
And they're expected to happen, and then he gets sworn in, and people are saying, I don't think that was supposed to happen. Where is Trump? And it just went against there. And there's some of them who still think he's got a secret plan, running a shadow government. Trump is playing into that by opening up the office of the former president, says we're going to have many meetings and many phone calls. And it's just like, so that's leading to, them thinking that, maybe he's still got a plan to do this. I mean, it's just, but others are being discouraged. And there's there are a few things to consider that, but this trial is going to be a little bit different from the last one, and it's going to be televised, and probably a lot of people are going to be watching it. So,
well, can I ask you two quick questions on that? And if these questions step on your later prediction, let me know, and we can save it for later. But one, do you think Donald Trump will be called as a witness?
I don't know. You don't have to testify against yourself, right? You got the Fifth Amendment, because he could at this point be criminally charged. So he doesn't. Yeah. I don't think we can force him to. Question is whether or not he shows up. He's already got an attorney lined up. Yeah. The question is whether or not he actually shows up. Does he use an idiot like Steve Jordan again this time around? To help him defend. I haven't heard that, but.
The other question is, do you think, given some of the recent votes that have been taken in the U.S. Senate just this week, actually, do you think that they are going to actually change their mind and move toward censure of the president instead?
I'm gonna talk a little bit about that at the end. We will wait. Right.
I thought one of those might interfere with a prediction. So okay.
Yeah. All right. So we do have this again. It's going to be real interesting to see how that happens. But right now, the Democrats even are backing off. There's going to be a lot of preparation for the trial, but the Democrats are kind of backing off that at the moment because they don't want Biden's agenda to be slowed. We've got a pandemic here. McConnell finally kind of caved. I think he got some kind of little promises from Sienna and Mankin that they wouldn't wouldn't be for absolutely abolishing the filibuster and the rest, but it really wasn't anything in writing, and he did kind of back down, and finally now they're able to set up their committees and the rest. But we've got a pandemic here. We can't. It can't be like 10 years ago when they're trying to basically make it bipartisan and it was a completely futile effort and they gave up on the public option and all kinds of other things to have the ACA be a lot weaker, come out a lot weaker. They can't do that. This pandemic has to be addressed aggressively. He needs to be able to buy the 200 million more vaccines. He needs to be able to hire 100,000 people to come out and do what the state infrastructure can't and what the private industry either can't or won't. He needs to get that moving. He needs to get those shots into people's arms, and we need also a stimulus to get back so that the economy can roll once we can come out of all of the precautions that we're taking to keep it from spreading. We got to learn whether or not the vaccine actually prevents us from infecting people. We've got to have that on top of it. We need to be able to save some of the local and federal governments. Republicans are going to balk at that because it's a lot of Democrats, quote unquote Democrat cities that are involved, and the rest. They cannot. Bipartisanship is great, unity is great, but they've got to get something done. And if it means they have to use reconciliation to roll over the Republicans, they've got to be willing to do that. Now, Chuck Schumer, in his interviews, have been saying he's willing to do it. And McConnell finally did back down, although McConnell is kind of waffling. He was sort of hinting that he might actually vote for the impeachment. He didn't. We'll see what happens come the trial. But the Republicans have a problem, and the Democrats have to stay aggressive here. They cannot be passive or obsessed with bipartisanship. We're not in a situation like that right now.
I think you're right. I think the other thing we need to do is pay close attention to some of the variants of COVID that are showing up. Apparently there's one that's of particular concern right now in Brazil. All of this needs to be done. And any one of these things would be a massive undertaking in normal times. Yet it's all happening at once. So which means so far, I think the Biden administration is doing all that we can expect, at least so far.
At least so far.
Given the circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans pushing for targeted, let's not give the 1,400 to the, to the upper middle class. It's like, you're going to, part of the reason they didn't do that to begin with is you end up spending more trying to determine who's qualifies and who doesn't than your money you're saving by not just giving it to a lot of the people. Plus, upper middle class people will probably spend it. The point is we want the money going into the economy and fueling the recovery, the restaurants and gyms and theaters that are going to hopefully be reopening within the next few months. We need the money to make that possible. Anyway, we'll see what happens. It seems like the Democrats are willing to push it forward, but they just can't obsess over bipartisanship. It'd be nice if the Republicans come along, and I expect they'll get some, but they cannot obsess with that right now. Anyway, I've said that 20 times.
I think you're right. I especially think for right now, you're 100% right, because the current strain of republicanism in Congress right now is not interested in bipartisanship at all. They're interested in complete power. So I don't think there's a lot of bipartisanship to gain there right now anyway. The whole idea was to get to 50 plus Kamala Harris, you got 51. Get whatever you can get done before 2022, when you might have a problem in the midterm elections. Do things now.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the Senate? Because, the conventional wisdom is that, well, in the first midterm, the party that is not holding the president office loses seats in both the Senate and the House. It may not happen this time in the Senate, may not happen in the House either, but it may not happen this time in the Senate. First of all, there's a little bit of good news for Democrats that I read on 538 today, and that is, since the January 6th events, 30,000 Republicans in the states where they track this, and it's not all states, 30,000 Republicans have transferred outside of the Republican Party, either to become Democrats, decline to state, or third parties. And some of those might be leaving the party because they're disappointed that they didn't stand up to Trump. But a number of them are re-registering as Democrats. That's good news that there is a section of the Republican Party that does not want to be part of the party of Trump. And that will escalate if the Republicans continue to start to back off of the courage that they found in the days after they were almost killed, right? I mean, so it's just so that's one thing. The other thing is that the Democrats have been at a real disadvantage the past two Senate races. The 2018 was horrible because it was mostly red states that were, they had to win. And Democrats have an inherent disadvantage these days, or liberals in general have an inherent disadvantage because the Senate is worse than the electoral college system in terms of being affirmative action for rural white conservatives. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And in a day that you don't get people like McGovern being elected in South Dakota, or a populist being elected in Montana, you don't have that. Actually, bad choice. Montana does have a pretty decent Democrat, but it's really hard for that to happen. But this map is actually looking pretty good for the Democrats, and it's gotten even better because we've had several Republicans announce their retirements in swing states. Essentially, you've got Portman just announced it. And he's in North Carolina, right? Ohio.
Richard Burr, North Carolina.
Is Toomey North Carolina?
No, that's Pennsylvania. Richard Burr is in North Carolina.
Right. Okay. So the three of them are going to retire. Johnson is considering retiring, but he also has taken some kind of crazy Trump stands that might put him in trouble in Wisconsin. So he may decide to retire because he feels that he's going to lose. That's four pickups for
Chuck Grassley in Iowa.
That's going to be tough, but especially if Grassley plays it smart. But a possibility. Iowa,
There's also speculation about Blunt in Missouri, maybe not running again. So
and he was the one who
supported Hawley. Yeah,
but he did. But he also showed up to the inauguration. He officiated part of it, and that might be why he's considering retiring because he may pay for that. So anyway, there aren't a lot of Democrats in danger. In this coming around, in reasonable danger. I mean, they're always in potential danger, but the battleground states look like they could switch from Republican to Democrat. Democrats could actually pick up the Senate, could lose the House, but maybe not that either, even because a lot of Trump people are becoming discouraged and saying they're not going to vote anymore. You've got different tiers of kind of crazy there, either, well, I'm just going to take my ball and go home and not participate anymore, or I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah, I think the most surprising of those that you listed there was Rob Portman in Ohio, at least as far as I'm concerned. Some may disagree, but I was most surprised about Portman in Ohio. And that's an interesting state. I have a prediction about that later in the show, about some real specifics there. But I think that was the one that was most surprising to me. And the moment he made that announcement, and he did it publicly, to his credit. He didn't just leak it to the press. He actually made a statement about it, talking about the lack of bipartisanship and the lack of the ability to get anything at all done. It's very frustrating to him. So he's saying, I'm done. Now, right after he made that announcement, though, immediately all kinds of names popped up about who might be on the ticket to replace him, and immediately the first name was Jim Jordan, the Trump Republican, in the U.S. House right now, and I think he might be on the ticket. I think he'll have a more difficult time running statewide than Portman.
No, that would be good news for Democrats if he won that
I think so too, and that's going to be part of my prediction. But it just shows you how intense the situation is right now. It took less than a few minutes for just a whole list of names and people already talking about it. And let's not forget, we're already in 2021. The midterm elections are in November of 2022. So, it's just a year and a half away, which means this fall, those campaigns are going to be ramping up already. So, and never at a more critical time than right now.
Yeah, I wonder who is favored on the Democratic side.
I got some thoughts on that in predictions. There are some, and that's going to be an interesting choice because let's not forget, even though Sherrod Brown is the other senator from Ohio, and he's a Democrat, considered progressive. He's from Cleveland, has held state offices before, so he's well known in the Columbus area. So he knows how to win the state of Ohio as a Democrat. Yes. So there's some help there, I think. And from what I've been reading, and I used to live there, and so I've talked to folks in Ohio about this. Already there's speculation that Sherrod Brown is going to be on board as an advisor to whoever it is who wants to take a shot at that and see if they can get that second Senate seat for the Democrats. So there's all
about the working class and unions in Pennsylvania. That's what it's about. That's what he appeals to. That's how Biden won that. It was an appeal to the working class in Pennsylvania. Doesn't have to just be the white working class, the working class in general. That's what it's about there. So
yeah, that's the Toomey seat in Pennsylvania, and that's going to be a tough one as well. I don't know who's going to be on the ticket there. And I think North Carolina is a little hard to, still a little fuzzy there. There are some folks.
Cunningham might try to make her try again?
I was just going to say that could be one. There are also some local politicians in Asheville and Charlotte who are talking about whether they're going to run. And then the Grassley thing in Ohio. I think the reason Chuck Grassley is thinking about retiring might have more to do with age than it does with the current political climate. He's in his 80s. And if I'm not mistaken, he's 82 or 84, something like that. So I think he's just ready. I don't think it really has anything to do with the current
I hope he goes because he's, again, one of those politicians I have little respect for. He wrote a bunch of the ACA, made sure that there were certain things that were in it and not in it. He was in that committee. And right up until the end says, oh, and we need to have this in it and not that. And he says, oh, and by the way, I'm not going to vote for it. Republicans are not going to have any Republicans voting for it. So here he gets to basically write the bill, make it a lot weaker than it ought to have been, make it without a public option, and then he doesn't even vote for the thing. I'm sorry, I have no respect for him after that. I hope he leaves.
That would be a tough pickup for Democrats, but you never know. Anything is possible. The other interesting thing I think over the last week was Sarah Sanders, the former press secretary, announcing her candidacy for governor of Arkansas. She that same day got an endorsement from Trump, and I think she's probably a lock to win that.
Well, I don't know. There's other
Really?
Republicans running that they're talking about too with big names. And one of the problems is I don't know how many people have gone from being the press secretary to getting elected to a position like that, because there's all kinds of footage to use against you. Every
Right.
lie you told, and
Yeah.
pretty much in that role, you're telling a lie every day, at least one, right? I mean, that's your job.
Especially
So
that administration. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Well, but her dad was governor. She's got the name recognition, and that's half the battle is who are you? Oh, we know you, sure. You
yeah,
know.
but Huckabee's out there too. But anyway, we'll hear about that. But we are at the time of the show where we provide our predictions. We'll see. So far, I'm not doing all that well this year. I did predict a couple of things, but I think I'm below 50% at this point. But we'll see what happens this time. But go ahead, Chuck.
First of all, since we just recently talked about Ohio, my prediction is that the race to replace Rob Portman in the U.S. Senate is going to be between Republican Jim Jordan, who's currently a congressman, and Democrat Tim Ryan, who is also a congressman. Interestingly enough, Tim Ryan is from the area around Youngstown, which is working class unions, centrist by any stretch of the imagination. So I think Tim Ryan is the kind of person in Ohio who would be viewed at least with an open mind by independents and even some centrist Republicans. So I think that's a possibility. The other possibility is the mayor of Dayton, Ohio, Nan Whaley. Again, kind of a centrist area. So I think either Nan Whaley or Tim Ryan could be good statewide candidates with the advice of Sherrod Brown about how to run a statewide campaign in Ohio. Second prediction, the date, March 4th. Originally, the inauguration of new presidents was on March 4th. It got moved up to January to reduce the amount of time in a lame duck president's term. I think what's going to happen on March 4th is that Trump, who has already created the office of the former president, or whatever he called it, down in Palm Beach, is going to hold some sort of ceremony on March 4th, and it's going to be well attended by folks who are supporters of his, and they're going to claim that they have a presidency in exile on March the 4th.
Okay. All right. Well, my prediction is about the trial. I believe the impeachment trial will go forward. I don't think Democrats are going to accept censorship as an alternative. They really need to know that, really emphasize that this was a coup attempt. This was not just a riot. This was not just, something bad that happened, a party that got out of control. This was a coup attempt. And one of the things about a publicized trial like that is one of the reasons that the Republicans McConnell blocked all new evidence was in the prior trial, is that a trial can reframe it for the country. Right now, everybody thinks it's just a party that got out of hand. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people do. If evidence comes out that Trump knew or should have known, that there were intelligence reports about this, that he knew there are crazies who are armed and ready in the crowd at the time that he gave that speech, I don't think anybody's going to buy the fact that he used the word peaceful once in the speech, that undid it. That could transform things. My prediction is more than 5 Republicans will vote for it, but I don't think they'll get the 17. On that. And real quickly, another prediction is, we didn't talk about this tonight. Maybe we need to talk about it, but I think Governor Newsom is going to be facing a recall. I think he will defeat the recall, but I think it'll be a lot closer for comfort. I don't know that he has set himself up for moving towards becoming the president someday. I think his mishandling of this on several different fronts, both symbolically in terms of showing up to that meeting, and the fact that we are dead last in the vaccines being spread out. Granted, it's a big state, got a lot of problems with it, but it just, he was just not ready for it. And that's going to be bad. They will get the signatures. I think it'll fail because everybody's going to know what the agenda is behind it. But that's it. So, all right, time to wrap. Any comments on that real quick, Chuck?
No, I was just gonna say that's interesting. And you think that even if he survives the recall, that will stall his career?
I think so. I think it'll be a long time before he can run for president. But he's young too,
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right. That does it for the show tonight. We'll be back next week. We'll have a lot more executive orders, a lot more people that have made it into the cabinet, and probably more on Trump. I don't think we're going to not be able to talk about him for a while. So till then, next time.